Good afternoon to all of you who are with us today, and welcome to this space of information. From the American Red Cross delegation in Panama, Crystal Madrid greets you, and today's program we will be talking about 2020 pre-hurricane preparedness and planning, a year like no other. We would like to invite all listeners to ask their questions at any time through the Facebook page Cruz Roja Americana en las Américas or through the Instagram accounts at Delegación CRA or at IFRC_ES. The hurricane season officially begins on May 15 in the Pacific Ocean and in June 1st in the Atlantic. In both cases, it lasts until November 30. Today, we're joined by the head of the Disaster Crisis Prevention, Response and Recovery from the IFRC, Jonan Salone, the head of Policy, Strategy and Knowledge Unit from IFRC, Raynette Roger, and the search delegate of the American Red Cross, Drew Strowell, who will speak to us about this topic. Welcome you all.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Thanks, Crystal.
Thanks.
Likewise.
Hi, I pass the word to Jono.
Thanks, Crystal, and thanks to our friends at American Red Cross for hosting this. It's always exciting to chat with friends and the Red Cross family about topics like hurricane preparedness, and especially this year, as Crystal mentioned, it's a year like no other. I think globally, we're watching some of our colleagues in Asia Pacific going through their version of typhoons or hurricanes, and really some interesting themes that we'll explore today on today's program. So thanks again to our colleagues at American Red Cross for hosting this. So just wanted to open up the dialogue a bit by first, maybe Drew, I know you've done a lot of work really with the National Hurricane Center and our colleagues at NOAA with the US government, but any thoughts that you have about what we're hearing about this year's hurricane season and what it may mean for us in the context of preparedness?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jonah. And thanks for the opportunity to talk to you guys. What we're seeing from the forecasters this year is a prediction for a very active hurricane season in the Atlantic, focusing mainly on that. Where the Pacific, they're talking about 13 to 16 storms, which will lead to 3 to 5 major hurricanes for the Pacific season, which runs now through December. But the one we're really worried about as well is also, and monitoring actively, is the 14 to 20 forecast storms for the Atlantic, and which will result, the estimates are 4 to 6 major hurricanes. So we're talking about an active season. We were just talking and reminding ourselves about last year's season with the Category 5 hitting Bahamas, and the year before that with Maria hitting multiple islands in the Caribbean. So we're looking at this will be a very active year. I mean, we know that this science relies on a couple different sources, so it's not all declared science. It's an estimation, and there may be differences in the numbers, but still we're planning on it being an active season, and we need to be prepared for it, and especially given the environment that we're operating in now with COVID and migration. So it's going to be, we're going to be busy this year.
That's what I was fearful of. I was hoping you'd deliver some more optimistic news, but I suppose it's better to always plan for the worst and hope for the best. Correct. So if you're wrong, we won't hold you to it. We would actually welcome the opportunity for there to be a little bit less activity. Raynette, just your perspective, you've spent a lot of time with the Reference Center in the Caribbean and really know the networks there quite well. As you're listening to Drew and a lot of the dialogue around hurricane preparedness this year, what are your thoughts in terms of like how this year is different? Aside from it possibly being a little bit more active, but what thoughts are you kind of going through your mind with all the experience and context you have?
Yeah, thanks so much, Jono, and thanks everyone for the opportunity, and Drew for the news on how it's looking for us this year. Not great. But this year offers opportunities, and I think thinking positively, what the pandemic has offered for us is a way for us to really tap into different levels of our human talent and our networks of volunteers and our national societies. The Red Cross is very well known for the investment in training. We spend a lot of time and funding, really preparing our national societies and learning from them, learning from each other in terms of how we organize ourselves in anticipation of the hurricane season or other hazards that we anticipate come around every year. And I think what's happening now is, this offers an opportunity for us to refresh those plans, to look at what we know, also to engage the network very differently. There have been a number of webinars, and I know we're going to speak about a large event that's coming up focused on this. And this is where we can really capitalize on the knowledge of the centers and other technical units as well, where they're learning opportunities continually. And where we also have an opportunity as well to refresh our learning and capacities that we've been so well trained to do in the past.
Those are great recommendations, Renette, and especially the opportunities. I like how you refer to them as that, as insurmountable as sometimes they seem. Drew, kind of picking up on that theme, American Red Cross has had a lot of experience responding to hurricanes, both domestically, but also with the international support that you provide the Red Cross family and Red Crescent family across the globe. Any thoughts or perspectives you have about how you're thinking about preparedness a little bit differently this year, or considerations that you're taking to factor into this year's hurricane planning?
Yeah, thanks, Jono. Yeah, we were just talking actually yesterday with our colleagues in the domestic, so coming from American Red Cross, yeah, they have quite a large preparedness program that they work on, and we'll be fortunate to have one of the specialists who does the storm tracking with us during the event on during the week of May 25th. But they were always talking about, our colleagues in the domestic American Red Cross were always talking about having to plan for two simultaneous events. So if we look at the forecast for this year, and we see that it's looking at 4 to 6 major hurricanes, we as an organization need to be prepared to be able to run a major operation for a high category hurricane in one area, but also in another area. So like I'm going back to the 2017 storm season when we had Irma and Maria both rattling around the Atlantic. So we need to be prepared, as an organization, not just domestically, the American Red Cross, but internationally as the Red Cross, Red Crescent family, to be able to respond to 2 major events at the same time. So that's the kind of stuff that we're thinking through, of like, resource allocation, how would we be doing our people, our things, how would we respond to 2 major events simultaneously. But then if we add the filter of, say, the restrictions happening in terms of how we work and respond with COVID-19 preparedness in mind, and how we deploy people, that's kind of the things that we're thinking through. And those are some big questions that we'll be talking about in more detail, I'm sure, as a movement during the week of the 25th, yeah?
Absolutely. I think in particular, movement of stuff has come up quite a bit in, I know, our early conversations, logistics, supply chain, but also the movement of our personnel, volunteers, paid staff, et cetera. And really just, I think one of the considerations that we're hearing a lot about is really just, Renette spent a lot of time with her team really thinking through the protection of volunteers and making sure that whether it be insurance schemes or other protections are really kind of thought out for volunteers, including national societies or Red Cross at the country level, working with their governments to ensure international disaster laws that allow for that entry. As I could probably go on for hours, but I think that's what we're excited about the week of the 25th. Renette, like on that theme of volunteerism and things that volunteers and paid staff could be doing, we know that volunteers are the lifeblood of our movement. It started that way, and it continues to be just a major force for mobilizing humanity. What are some of the pieces of advice that you're seeing pop up from peers, from the network itself, in terms of how volunteers and paid staff can get prepared? What things should they be thinking about as we approach hurricane season in the Atlantic and kick off that in the Pacific?
Oh, great question, Jono. I mean, first, you said it well. I mean, volunteers and our staff, but our volunteers are really the backbone of our movement, and it would really be remiss of me not to recognize the efforts and the commitment that they've been making across the globe. And our region is no different. They've remained committed now more than ever. I think all of us are in awe by how, they've been organizing themselves and working. It's really humbling. And it's why we're so proud to be part of this organization. I think there are a number of trends that we're seeing, and this new environmental way of working with COVID has prompted a number of reactions and thoughts. Of course, the first you've touched on in terms of the protection and safety of our volunteers. It's a little bit more complicated this year than it has been in the past. So we're really thinking about how we strengthen our current insurance coverage for our volunteers and staff. It remains a top priority, ensuring that our volunteers and staff have adequate personal protective equipment, for example. They have those things in place. This first and foremost is our responsibility to ensure that they have what's needed to adequately go out in the field. So I think this is a common theme. But besides that, it's really around really combing through your National Society Response Plan, your contingency plan for hurricanes, ensuring it's relevant, it's been updated based on this context, that the SOPs are aligned to this new way of working. These are, also some of the discussions that are coming through. And then one thing around this proliferation and this way of connecting online for everything. And this is where I really highlight as well the opportunity that even as a volunteer or staff member, if you're not able to be in your national society or in your branches before, there are many ways to still support the work of your national society and remain connected virtually by communicating key preparedness, public education, public awareness, risk communication messages through social media channels, through your national society, and really being very careful as well to filter. And we have a responsibility, I say, to do that, filter fake news as well, which is very common now in this current context and way of working. So I think as we prepare for this hurricane season as well, there are some themes that we've put forward to be featured on the agenda for the meeting that we'll speak of, which hopefully will kind of help to close the loop and to support that overall preparedness approach that we'll have as a Red Cross throughout the region.
Thanks, Renette. I think those are critical aspects to look at the protection of the volunteer workforce, and then leveraging those technologies, those virtual learning forums, pretty amazing opportunities. And Drew, advice. You've been at this for a long time as well. And although this is a very different hurricane season, both in your professional role and the role representing the American Red Cross, what are some things that you would recommend volunteers and paid staff within the network to be considering?
Okay, thanks for the question, Jono. Yeah, I mean, preparedness for us in the American Red Cross starts at home, right? So as volunteers and staff, we also need to take care of our loved ones, starting in the household with our disaster plans, being prepared for a long hurricane season, and having a basic continuity plan for yourself and for your family. But also, I would say being connected. Renette mentioned all the opportunities to be connected. You can be a virtual volunteer for the Red Cross throughout Latin America and connect in multiple ways that will help us do our mission. I would also say, in terms of advice, is it's definitely something that we should be, I think, Renette used the word fake news. We need to also be sources of reliable and actionable information. So we strive to do that as an organization. We rely a lot on our image and our brand, that we are inspire confidence and trust. So I think you'll see that in the agenda that we have for the May 25th. You know, we're having some people, some scientists come in, some meteorologists, some other organizations that are coming in, but we also want to be the sources of really reliable and actionable information. So start at home with preparedness, be connected with your national society, find a way to connect with us. You don't always have to show up to our offices to be a volunteer. You can be a virtual volunteer. And I guess the last bit of advice would be, let's think of this as a marathon and not a sprint. I mentioned about the possibility that we're going to have two major events at the same time. We as an organization, we run and we tire ourselves out a lot on response. This is going to be a long period through December, and we may, you know, a lot of us are already working full out on COVID-19 and all of that. I know you guys have and everybody who's on this call, a lot of them are involved in this. So think of this as a marathon, not a sprint. There's gonna be a lot going on between now and December. So stay safe, yeah, and pace yourself.
I like those self-care messages, and also preparedness starts at home. Can't say that too many times, certainly. So we've been talking a lot about the hurricane preparedness events coming up. So we are fortunate that on the week of 25 May, for the 5-day period of that work week, the Red Cross Network, hosted by International Federation of Red Cross and supported by our partners with French Red Cross and their regional platform, with thought leadership from Canadian Red Cross and the American Red Cross, are pulling together a week full of fun activities, really to try to prepare, as Renette and Drew had mentioned, for possible worst case scenarios, but hoping for the best. We do have opportunities. I think Renette mentioned this, for all levels of Red Cross, from volunteers to paid staff to governance, to participate in the Hurricane Preparedness Conference this year, the first virtual conference of its kind. Traditionally, many of you know, we pull together stakeholders in a location that typically is either Panama or somewhere within the Caribbean to talk about hurricane preparedness. But Renette's word of opportunity is one that strikes me as really what this conference is about. And really anybody that is interested can go online. If you're on the YouTube channel, I've placed the URL in the YouTube channel, and the web address is virtual, virtual, so virtual.redcrossprehurricaneconference2020.org. It's a mouthful, so I'm going to say it again. It is virtual.redcrossprehurricaneconference2020.org. And we're excited to encourage those that are listening to today's program to register. It's not meant to be 5 days sitting in a seat where you're going to possibly fall asleep on day 2 from just one-way communication. We're anticipating really dynamic two-way conversation, breakout groups, with the idea, as Drew and Renette both mentioned, some actionable steps that national societies, the Red Cross Network, can actually take to update their hurricane plans in the context of COVID. So before we end today's program, I'd like to ask Renette and Drew both. They've both been heavily involved in the pre-hurricane conference planning. What are you most excited about for the conference? And I know you're excited about the whole thing, but if you were to have to say a thematic area or something that really stood out as, gosh, that's really going to be something that we need to talk about as a Red Cross family, what would that be? I'll start with Renette.
Great. Well, let's say, I mean, I'm excited about the whole agenda, but I know that's not a good enough answer. No, I mean, the agenda is really well put together with a number of, I would say, priority themes that I think not only excite all of us on the call, but will excite all of those who join. To be a little biased, perhaps, maybe I'm a little excited about the lunch and learn sessions. I think just in terms of, you know, how we want to be able to present it and also, you know, generate enthusiasm in terms of how volunteers can prepare be ready before, during, and after in the event of something happening. So no one particular session, I think, besides that, it comes to mind, but I think the agenda is going to be really well received. And as you mentioned, the inclusive way of trying to connect with different aspects of our national societies and partners as well is really a wonderful, unique opportunity to have a lot of participation, good feedback, and ultimately that means more people prepared and coordinated. So excited about the overall agenda.
I like it. I'll buy that answer. I'll buy that answer. How about you, Drew?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I also am excited about a lot of the aspects in terms of the other partners who are going to be showing up to the Hurricane Conference. And so I know we have OCHA on tap, as well as some other partner organizations and the reference centers that are within the Red Cross, Red Crescent family. But also we were excited to confirm some of the scientists and meteorologists who are at the National Hurricane Center in the United States. So these are the guys who are the leads in doing all of the follow-up work around meteorology and forecasting, and are going to help us understand a little bit about hurricane science, the forecasting tools that exist, and also the tools that they use and decision matrix, decision tools that they use to how they take care of their populations that are exposed to hurricanes. So not only is it going to be kind of Red Cross themes, but we'll also have this science theme, and we'll have 2 or 3 leading practitioners in that who will teach us some of the basics on hurricane forecasting and the tools they use, the decision-making process, and then talk about tools that they use for forecasting storm surge, which, as some of you may know, is the one that causes the most mortality in a lot of hurricanes, especially in the Caribbean. So I'm really excited to have that breadth of knowledge and experience, and other organizations that'll come and share with the Red Cross, Red Crescent movement that week of the 25th. Thanks.
Thanks, Drew. Science, super important in tackling some of these crazy issues that we're confronted with. But I'd say also, just as we're wrapping up, really excited that this really is a whole of community effort. So I think you raised a really good point. While we're very proud of the Red Cross and Red Crescent activities across the globe, we can't do it alone. So leveraging the power of science, the academic communities that might attend, as well as UN family members and other NGOs, I think will add a great amount of richness. So without further ado, just a quick repeat of the long URL for the conference, if you're interested. Again, virtual.redcrossprehurricaneconference2020.org. If you happen to forget that, any of your Red Cross focal points through which you normally communicate can easily pass along that information. I was remiss to mention that we are excited that this year's conference is being co-hosted by the President of the Bahamas Red Cross, President Therese Curry, which is just an honor for us to have that in-depth experience and knowledge, having gone through Hurricane Dorian and the vast experience of that national society, not just last year, but for decades, frankly. So that will be a great kick-off perspective on Monday the 25th at 9 a.m. for those that are able to join. And I'll turn it back over to Christelle, but I'll stop by saying, Drew and Renette, thank you both very much. Your thought leadership in co-creating this, as well as partners that may be listening from the French Red Cross PIRAC platform, as well as our Red Cross colleagues. Over to you, Christelle.
Thank you so much, Jenna. Well, I would like to inform that we have connected 80 devices among the region. And I would like to remember to the audience that they can listen to broadcasts in our website, amcross.org, or in the Red Cross Radio, in Spotify, or in this channel of YouTube. Thank you so much for all of you for bringing us all this information and for let us know about the coming conference. Thank you all for all this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
so much.
Christelle.
Stay safe,
See you later.
everyone.